What if the secret to vibrant midlife health isn't more control, but more pleasure? Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry, the host of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. And in this episode, I am joined by Carla Wainwright, somatic sex educator and guide for a conversation that will change the way that you see your body forever. We're exploring how pleasure is medicine for your hormones, your nervous system, and your spirit, and why reclaiming it might be the most radical act of self-love you can take in midlife, because pleasure isn't indulgent, it's intelligent. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am so excited to welcome Carla to the show today. Welcome, Carla.
Hi, I am thrilled to be here too.
So I'm going to actually have Carla introduce herself because she is such a multi-dynamic practitioner that I think that she's going to do a far better job capturing the essence of all of the awesome work that she does.
Okay. I'm a holistic wellness coach and a sexual awakening facilitator, but I really love to go by the title of midlife alchemist. And I think that really sort of brings in the various aspects of what I do and some of my history. So a midlife alchemist is, I work with what I call the sacred metabolism, which is really supporting women 40 plus to support their bodies through this really powerful portal and transition from perimenopause into menopause, by tending to this incredible physical body that we have that is such an incredible gift, but often can have its own challenges, and also supporting the energetic body. So I feel like, as women, especially, we have to really attend to the sacred feminine within us, but we need to attend to both of those. So when I say midlife alchemist, alchemy is the process of turning base metals into gold. And, in the medieval times, they tried to do that, probably not with any success whatsoever. But of course, this whole idea of changing something that is perhaps not fully formed or precious into something that's really powerful and precious. That is what an alchemist does. And this is the transition that I really feel women go into in most powerful time of their life. And my role as the alchemist is to help them get there in the most vibrant, expansive, and juicy, easeful way possible.
Ooh, see, I wasn't going to do that amazingness justice. I love the fact that you refer to yourself as an alchemist, because I do too. I talk about myself as a cycle alchemist because we're taking the energetic psychology of things, and I bring medical intuition into what I do, but it's like that marriage of science and the fact that as female bodies, we're very emotionally driven, and that energy often gets stuffed down into our system, and then it turns into various kinds of symptoms. And I'm sure that you see that in your work as well, because when we have suppressed our voice and our essence energy for a long period of time, and it usually comes to a head in midlife because you are out of alignment with your truth. Often because life is busy, you're trying to keep the peace and just do like all the things that life demands of you. And you lose touch with yourself. And so like I see that often in my practice with like pelvic floor dysfunction and yes, cycle changes are inevitable when it comes to this transitional stage of life, but the severity of the symptoms often also dovetail with where they aren't expressing themselves or they're trying not to fight with a spouse. It's kind of like trying to put all this kinetic energy in a box and the spring gets really, really tight and then it goes boom. And this is where women talk about the rage and the fact that they're irritable with everybody. And I had one client describe it as, I've turned into a fire breathing dragon, send help. I've had some women describe it as an out of body experience where they're like, I hear my mouth moving and this voice in my head is going, why are you freaking out right now? But you're just so in the frustration and the feeling of that frustration. And the change in our hormonal cocktail turns into a lack of, estrogen is our fluffing hormone. It's the softening hormone. Well, it also helps us keep the peace and hold our tongue. And as that chemistry in our body changes, all of a sudden you've got male partners going, who is this person? Because you're saying all these things and you've never talked about this before, or why are you being so edgy? And it's because these things have been kept quiet in the corner or swept under the rug for so much time that by the time we hit this really powerful portal, the door busts open and you're invited to step through this transformational portal into alignment with your authentic self. And there's no more sweeping things under the rug because hormonally, your body literally won't allow it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. So many things in there that you said. There's that saying in yoga, I'm a longtime yoga teacher, that, the issues are in the tissues, right? And so in some ways we could describe it on the one hand as a perfect storm, but also a perfect opportunity. Mm-hmm. So, as a woman's going through this transition, absolutely, there are these very real and necessary biological changes that are happening, but they're so exacerbated by our modern living and lifestyle that is so incredibly stressful. There's a real biological mismatch between the beautiful design of our bodies, and nothing is designed incorrectly. They're supposed to move through this transition. But when we overlay that with all of the pressures and many respects is kind of like artificial overlay of modern life, we really, really struggle. And, as you were talking about the anger, I remember having a moment in my late 40s where my kids were like, Mom, why are you so angry all the time? And it was a big wake up call for me because, of course, I knew I was angry and irritable. But when they pointed it out, I was like, whoa, okay. Actually, This is more than like just 10%. It's probably a lot more than 10%. So, yeah, there are all of these things that happen. And it can feel like a perfect storm. And I think that if we don't necessarily have context or support or information or understanding, then it stays in the place of storm rather than in the place of opportunity.
I agree with that. And I feel like there are a lot of women that are stepping into this phase of their life right now. Like over 1 million women are hitting perimenopause right now. And really with not a lot of information. And what is out there is HRT will solve your problems. Yeah. And it's like, well, hold on. Like you said, are perfectly designed. And we're meant to go through this transition. But it is the modern day world that is exacerbating. We have light pollution. Think about all of the blue light that we're exposed to before we go to bed. The pace of our life, how fast it's moving, the fact that we're already overscheduled. And then we hit this phase of our life where some women are new mothers because they stepped into motherhood later. Some women are caring for aging parents, depending on how old their parents were when they had them. A lot of them, myself included, have teenagers, which honestly, from an evolutionary perspective, I think is kind of rude that Mother Nature thought it would be cool to put somebody coming into puberty and somebody coming out of their bleeding years in the same household at the same time.
Been there.
Like, what kind of joke is that? So it's very hard. And living that in my reality right now, like I have 3 teenagers and a 1-year-old living in my house and I'm almost 42. And it's like, Okay, so I can feel my hormones are starting to do this transition, and I'm living with the edginess of teenagers. And like, there are a lot of things kind of all happening at the same time. And yet, I feel a lot of gratitude because I have this information walking into it. For a lot of women, they're just like, my cycle started to get weird. Am I in perimenopause? I feel anxious. I feel depressed. Is this perimenopause? Is this the fact that I'm overscheduled and I'm overburdened? And like, what is actually going on? And the lack of collective information around this very powerful transformational moment in a woman's life is starting to get there, but really isn't there. I look at, some of the most Googled things because I want to keep this show relevant for what people are looking for. One of the most Googled things out there is, when does perimenopause start?
Mm.
Like, we don't even have that kind of basic information. It's terrible. It's the whole reason I put together a course called Rooted Rising, because I'm like, no, there actually are benchmarks in terms of where this starts. So when people are in the middle of it, they're not realizing that you're actually going through a complete neural rewiring in your brain because the chemistry of your hormones, you have receptors in your brain that interact with all of these things. And it's predominantly estrogen driven. And as that changes, your feelings, your perception of the world, the way you feel about things in your life begin to change simply because of this reworking that's happening. And it's a really powerful time. Chinese medicine, and because of your background, you probably work with this too, but I love the idea that they think about it as a second spring. It is a new beginning. It's not even a chapter in a book, it's a completely new book
Yeah.
that you're stepping into in your life. That's so powerful.
Incredibly powerful. I love that you brought up the second spring because it's an idea and it's like a North Star that really feels so inviting. And so the whole idea with the second spring is, instead of losing that sexual energy through our menstruation, and our sexual energy is the most powerful energy in our body, then gets led up into the heart, like it moves up into the heart and becomes, your creative power creatrix center. So yeah, I mean, we need to bring more of that into the discussion of what's happening so that, women as they're going through this transition it is a transition. And I can say now, like I'm now 2 years postmenopausally, things do begin to smooth out. But there is that transition period that is really challenging. And I think if women really understood that, oh, actually, you know what? The second spring's waiting for me. It may, in those moments that are really difficult, it's like, okay, this is really difficult. It's just like, labor.
Yes, you're in transition.
Yeah. But what's on the other side is incredible.
Yes. And it's a completely new way of moving through the world. It's like we have three really potent portals. And I've talked about this in season 2 of this show, but like, these are opportunities to hit a reset button on your health. You literally step into a new identity of who you are. One of those is when you start your bleeding years with your first period. One of those is every time you are postpartum. So whether you had 1 birth or 5 or whatever, it doesn't matter. Every time you are postpartum, you are stepping through a birth portal into a new version of who you are. And honestly, you have the ability, through how you nourish yourself, food intake, energetically, what you're surrounding yourself with, to completely reset your baseline. And the third is this very powerful portal that we're talking about, which is moving into your non-bleeding years across the threshold of menopause. And one thing that I loved in our screening call was that we were talking about pleasure as a gateway to optimal midlife health. And I loved what you were saying, because I hear so many women coming into my practice going, I just feel like my libido got up and left. And I don't really have a lot of drive right now. And so to think about those responses and pleasure actually optimizing your journey through this phase of your life, I would love to dive into that topic a little bit because I think for some people listening, it's going to turn their lived experience on their head a little bit, and it's going to invite them to critically think around, oh, well, maybe I could do something a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking this. So talking about pleasure is probably my favorite thing to talk about. And so the first thing that I'll share is that I think we have a little bit of a misunderstanding or a misassociation with pleasure having to be like connected to sex or libido. Pleasure is so much more expansive than that. So pleasure can be, you know, petting your cat and just really enjoying that, bare feet on the ground, a delicious hug with a friend, conversation that you love, you know, looking at the most glorious sunset. There's so many ways we can experience pleasure. And I think it's important that we broaden that definition because it is very true. Absolutely. A woman's libido can be affected in midlife. I want to be really clear that doesn't have to be like the end of everything. There's so many women 70, 80 beyond having the best sex of their life. But, you know, there's a whole process to really nurturing that. But just to come back to the pleasure piece, if it doesn't feel like your libido, your sexuality is really on fire the way you want it to be, we can still nurture our pleasure capacity in so many ways, like in some of the things that I just said. So let me share a little bit why pleasure is one of the first things to go as we go through this portal. Our bodies are wired for survival first and pleasure second. This is an evolutionary strategy and really important because we wouldn't have survived as a species if we just focused on pleasure and didn't actually pay attention to our surroundings and survival. But what that means is that women, especially more so than men, we consistently choose stress over pleasure. And so I think, yeah, it's crazy, but it's true, right? You're probably laughing because you're like, yep, true in my own life as well. So we're hardwired in that way. And at the same time, as human beings, we have this incredible capacity to make conscious choice. So the first thing is just recognizing like, okay, I know that I have a tendency to choose stress over pleasure, but I'm going to start paying attention. Maybe just start paying attention and noticing even in the moment or perhaps later in reflection, like where there could have been a different choice point. Right? So you want to do it slowly because it's not to say tomorrow you're suddenly going to be about all the pleasurable experiences, but it's about noticing, right? Mm-hmm. And so when our nervous system senses that we're under a threat, it diverts all of this energy away from pleasure. And our brain literally begins to downshift libido and joy and anything to do with pleasure because they're not essential to our survival mode. Okay, so we want to be aware that, okay, I'm hardwired to do this, but I can actually make a different choice. The paradox, of course, is that as our stress levels increase, A, because we're choosing stress, and B, because we're losing those neuroprotective effects of estrogen and progesterone, which means that we're way more likely to be in a fight or flight state because we don't have those neuroprotective effects. The paradox, of course, is that while we may not seek, pleasure is the antidote, right? So pleasure stimulates two incredible chemicals in the body, the first being oxytocin and the second being nitric oxide. So oxytocin, if we think about a hormonal hierarchy where we have our sex hormones on the bottom, as well as our thyroid hormones, and then on top of that, we have insulin. On top of that, we have cortisol. And then on top of that, we have oxytocin. So what I mean by that is that everything that is underneath another hormone is affected by what's on top.
Yep.
So if our blood sugar isn't stable, which it isn't for most people, only 8% of people are metabolically healthy, which is staggering. And I think something that women, especially in midlife and perimenopause, need to be paying a lot more attention to. And I know that's difficult, but it is a really, really essential piece of overall wellness and being able to move through this portal with more ease. So if insulin levels are kind of all over the map, blood sugar levels, if our stress levels are suppressing proper glucose management, they're also suppressing our sex hormones. Where we come into that idea of the antidote is oxytocin at the top. So if we experience more pleasurable moments, and oxytocin is released when we have those pleasurable moments, it begins this beautiful cascade effect of reducing cortisol, reducing inflammation, enhancing metabolic function, and optimizing your hormones. So even though your hormones are changing and shifting, which is a natural part of this transition, the big waves are not going to be so big. Mm-hmm. So we have to, as women, be really mindful that pleasure is the antidote. So how can we experience more pleasure in our life? One thing I want to mention too is that oxytocin only has a half-life of 3 minutes, right? So you can't have like one pleasurable moment and be like, yeah, I'm good, box checked. We actually have to seek it out frequently so that we're continuing to get that beautiful cascade of like neurochemical effect on the body. So, the ways that I recommend that women do this is I often link it to the senses. So if you could find 5 pleasurable moments in your day, one each connected to your senses, and I know you'll have more than 5, but if you ensure that you have one for each sense, then you know that through your day, you're kind of getting those little hits of oxytocin, which will then begin to regulate your nervous system in really, really powerful ways. So what would that be? Can I look at something that gives me joy? Maybe you have a picture. Maybe there's something in nature. Maybe you're looking at your child. Maybe it's a pet, whatever that is. And just pausing. The key is, of course, to pause and notice. Is there a favorite song you can listen to? Do you have a piece of clothing or like the softest blanket that you could just, run your hands through for a minute? What's your favorite taste that you'd like to have today? And is there an essential oil that just makes you feel so delicious inside? So really easy. That's 5 things that you can do. And by getting those hits through your day, you are ensuring that you're moving oxytocin and finding that antidote that we need so desperately in our stress-filled lives to begin to create more balance within our whole endocrine system. I think I'll pause there. I have more to share, but
No, that's amazing. No, keep going. I don't want to stop you. I know that everybody listening is like on the edge of their seat going, oh, that is manageable. That is something that I could do. And I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yes, it's totally manageable. And there will also be pleasurable moments that will sneak up on you, like when you're taking a shower and you're probably running through the list of the 10 zillion things you need to do afterwards. Could you just pause for 30 seconds and enjoy the warm water running down your head and your face? Like, that's one of my favorites. Can you be present with whatever's happening in the moment and just pick up on the pleasure that's actually just waiting there to be noticed, but we don't pay attention to it? The final piece I'll say, though, around those moments in terms of, ensuring that they're in your day is to also do a recap at the end of the day. So if you could do that with someone, your partner or your kids, that can be really fun. But just having an opportunity to reflect on these were like, what were my 5 highlight pleasure moments today? Just doing that triggers that whole cascade of oxytocin once again in the body. And then you're getting another amazing hit in your body as well. Yeah, so many benefits to pleasure. And then there's one other thing I'd like to mention just around nitric oxide. So that is also produced by pleasure. So when the body is in a state of arousal, or you take some really deep breaths, laughing, having a joy-filled moment, what that does is it improves your circulation, oxygenates the body. You get so much more oxygen to your brain, which, with all the brain fog, we absolutely need, and supports mitochondrial energy, which are the little powerhouses in all of your cell. But what it does is it restores those nitric oxide levels naturally because they're declining starting in perimenopause, and we want to bring those back up. So when we have these pleasurable experiences, not only are we getting oxytocin, but we're also getting nitric oxide, which is in itself is going to fuel this desire to have more and more pleasurable experiences.
That's awesome.
The book Bitter or Better, I Decide by Hannah Koch is a practical and uplifting guide to turning life challenges into stepping stones. Bitter or Better shows how to understand yourself, resolve conflict, strengthen relationships, and reconnect with the source of love so you can choose better, not bitter, every day. For more information, go to bitterorbetteridecide.com.
I'm just going to say our bodies are amazing. And this goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, and I completely agree with you, is that we're given all the things that our body needs. And often, beautiful landscapes, the textural experiences, like all those kinds of things. And I talk about my work in terms of ancient wisdom for the modern world because we lose touch with those very simple pleasures in life. One of my favorite places to do my thinking is in the shower. I feel like if I empty my brain, that's when like the downloads come through. And it's because I'm present in what I'm doing and I'm feeling myself running my fingers through the soap in my hair and that very visceral experience and not thinking about anything except that visceral experience. Often ideas will pop into my head and things like that. I have a girlfriend that said she put a whiteboard in her shower and I was like, that's brilliant. Like, I need to do that.
A great idea.
Because that's when the things come to me. And it's because I've allowed for space.
Yes.
And so I was a musician growing up. I'm still a musician. I work with frequency in my healing modalities, for Pete's sake. But as a musician, I had a mentor who said once that the rests in the music are the space that is music. They are equally as important as the notes that you are playing because they are what is giving the color to what you are playing. And that always stuck with me. And, you know, as we look at it in terms of health in this conversation, giving yourself the space to allow these pleasurable experiences to come in. You know, I'll tell people like when you walking is a great thing to do when you're in this midlife stage. But we're not power walking like we're going to the post office. We are meandering and looking at cloud animals and flowers and how the breeze feels on your face and things like this, which is exactly to your point, because your primal brain can only handle two things, survive or procreate, and your cycle will suffer. And you described it much more eloquently with the hormone cascade and how it affects your sex hormones. But survive and procreate is all the primal brain can handle, and survive always wins. So this meandering kind of walk, people go, oh, well, I'm not going to lose any weight with that. And I'm like, oh, well, you might just give it a try. Because in Western culture, we think we have to go hard or go home with everything. And I love what you were saying about how pleasure literally is a pattern interrupt for that kind of go mentality, because it forces you to literally and metaphorically stop and smell the roses. My husband teases me now because I'm the person that climbs into flower bushes and goes, oh, this rose is so pretty. And I take a picture of it. If anybody watches my Instagram stories, you'll see pictures of random nature things. And it's me forcing myself to slow down.
Yeah.
And enjoy and capture what is beautiful in front of me. Because I notoriously was that person that would I'm getting my fresh air right now, and I am power walking down to the mailbox. Like I am and have always been that person. But when you get to midlife, like it is an invitation to reevaluate the way you are spending your energy. And the speed with which you move through your life is part of that.
Absolutely. I think pausing, and I actually wish I could remember who came up with this term. So if you're listening, I apologize for not crediting you. But there's someone who talked about this concept of wild idling, which is really doing nothing. But doing nothing is so powerful. And it is very much a lost art. I see this in my kids. Like it's really hard for people to just be. Mm-hmm. And maybe one of the reasons the shower is so powerful for you is like, you can't be on your phone. You can't have like, maybe you could have a podcast playing, but you can't hear it. Like, it's just actually an environment where you have to just be. And in the being, in the wild idling, that is where the magic occurs. So I love the story you just shared about this musician. You know, in a yoga practice, you know, when we're really hopefully being very attentive to the experience in our bodies and our inner landscape, the magic is in the pause. Mm-hmm. The magic isn't necessarily in some complicated pose or even an easy pose. It's in the moment where you're actually just aligning into stillness and noticing what's happening.
Yes.
And so it is very much a lost practice because just the current way our society and everything runs is that we're not given the space to do that. And then I think that we actually get into a little bit of a loop where the stillness and the silence and the just being becomes uncomfortable because it's so foreign.
Yes.
Right? And so we have to titrate ourselves back to that. So if you're listening and it's like, oh, but just, you know, slowing down or it's so hard, Absolutely. I hear you. So just, try it for 30 seconds, right? And then you move to 45 seconds and then a minute, etc. Yes, like the pushing, the rushing woman syndrome, all of these things, like they are so taxing. And when we get to this phase in our life, usually in our 40s, it's like the body just starts to put the brakes on. It's like, yeah, brain, you may have a different idea, but this ain't happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a forced pause, which can be very uncomfortable if we don't have the tools and the framework to really support it.
Yes. And that forced pause often looks like body symptoms that are
Yeah.
inconvenient and uncomfortable. And what you were saying was making me think of Thich Nhat Hanh's The Art of Mindfulness. There is a part in it where he talks about the simple act of doing the dishes and feeling the water over your fingers and, watching and observing what it is that your hands are doing. And he's like, it could be making a cup of tea. It could be washing the dishes. It could be, these things that we do in our daily life too. A lot of things we do on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're very intentional and present in doing these quote unquote mundane day-to-day things, the idea of moving into stillness gets less foreign and a little bit less uncomfortable because you have this intentionality around going through your day. I know when I first started doing acupuncture, they would needle yin tang, which is right in the middle of the forehead. It's near your third eye, or it's at your third eye. And she always used to tell me, I know when you think too much while you're laying on the table because I pull the needle out and it bleeds. And I was like, what? I was not. And then I really had to think about it. I'm like, nope, it's because I'm using this time as I'm laying here thinking about the things that I need to do. And I started picturing the white room. So I'm going to date myself a little bit. I already revealed my age. So here we go. The movie Men in Black, when he's walking in and it's like this big white room, like at the very beginning of the first movie, there's not a single thing in it. You actually can't tell the difference between the floor and the ceiling because it's just like a white bubble. And I started picturing that room in my mind when I would go into my acupuncture appointments because I was like, if I can get into this white, empty space and let the thoughts that bump up against it just kind of pass for now, I'll just keep myself in that white room. And giving myself that concrete visual, it was so much easier to keep my brain empty. And I could get into my chi nap a lot faster. So that floaty feeling that you get with acupuncture. And you can even get it in Shavasana too. When you're laying there in Shavasana, that floating feeling that you get as your chi is moving, but you're allowing empty presence essentially is really, really powerful. And honestly, one of my favorite feelings. But I couldn't achieve it for a very long time. I was getting benefits from acupuncture, but I didn't get those deep, rich benefits until I could turn my brain off. And it is so hard for so many of us because in your midlife, you are managing a household, you have teens going to sporting events and this, that, and the other thing. And did so-and-so take their vitamins this morning? And did I pick up the dry cleaning? And crap, somebody needs to board the dog. We're going on a trip. Oh, well, okay. Did I end up picking up this other thing because the clothes need to be the season that we're not in right now, right? All those things just keep rolling through our head all the time. And sometimes there are very attentive partners that are a true partner in that kind of mental load. But a lot of women find themselves carrying the majority of the mental load. And I feel like it's just gotten even worse since COVID. Quite frankly, we saw women's stress levels hit an all-time high during COVID and lockdown and that whole experience because they were shouldering so much of the, okay, well, my kids are Zoom schooled and, just all the juggle that required and working from home at the same time. The pressure is a little different now, but I feel like that moment in our recent history really shifted the table for people experiencing these hormonal transitions and trying to just essentially survive the demands of their day-to-day life. So if you were to talk to some of these, I don't know how I could let anything go off of my plate to create space for myself, what would be the first step?
Oh, goodness. So the first step is really the intention. of it and recognizing that any step you may take doesn't have to be perfect. So many women are, very high achieving, set themselves to ridiculously impossible standards. And so if you have a vision that your self-care is going to be as on point as your mothering and perhaps partnership and work and all of those things, you're setting yourself up to just be probably disappointed and then perhaps give up, right? So super small incremental steps. I think that our nervous systems are so taxed that we need to do things in small, manageable ways that open our window of tolerance, our capacity to take more. So I do really think that many women can benefit, and I know sleep's been hard for me since I was a kid. So it's like, I really know how important sleep is, but getting up even like 5 or 10 minutes earlier, and that is just for you, is so important because most women are probably like me, that if you don't do it at the beginning of the day and you keep saying, I'm going to do it later, next thing you know, it's like 9:30, 10 and you're done. And that's just never going to happen. So I would say, can you just even get up 5 or 10 minutes early, and you can just even stay in bed and sit up and then just take 10 deep breaths. Set your intention for the day. Stroke your arms, your body. Say something loving to your body, even if you're not feeling particularly loving towards it for all kinds of reasons. And make that a very small but manageable, doable ritual that really sets the tone for the rest of your day. And then if you can layer on top of that, I'm going to give myself 5 pleasure moments, and they don't have to be long. They could be 30 seconds, right? Incrementally, and then have the reflection piece at the end of the day. I feel like for most women that would be doable. And if you are living in a house with a partner or even maybe older kids, sharing with them your intention around this and seeing if they can celebrate and support you. Hey, mom, did you get a chance? I'm super curious. What were your 5 pleasurable moments today? Or did you do your 5 minutes in the morning or something? And I mean, I know I have had teenagers, I get it. They may or may not do that. But if you can have the buy-in and the support of the people around you who can really celebrate your wins and then gently encourage you when you feel like you've gone off track, that can make a big difference. An accountability sister too. That's also another great thing. A friend hey, let's try this together and check in with each other every day.
I love that. I do something kind of similar to that, although I love how you broke it down. And I think that Carla's wisdom is a really manageable way to get started with all of this. For me, I had a hard time to slow down enough to create those moments for myself. And for me, it started with opening my curtains so that I'm getting the natural light in my eyes first thing in the morning, because that does affect how your hormones show up, everybody. And I put my hands over my heart. I'm a deeply energetically sensitive human, and it took me a long time as I was stepping into my perimenopausal years when I finally realized that part of what I was feeling was actually me absorbing what was going on around me. And I was feeling other people's stuff. And so something that was super powerful for me is I would put my hands over my heart and I would just ask her, how do you feel today? What's real for you today? And see what came up. I would just be quiet and let my body talk. And that became such a treasured 5 minutes for me in the morning. I guess it's a bit of a meditative practice, but it helped me figure out where my baseline was walking into my day. Mm-hmm. And then I could tell if I had an angsty teen, is this coming from me or am I feeling other people's stuff around me? And that level of discernment was really helpful for me because as a high functioning, high performing person, I was very anxious for a lot of time because I just felt like it was always me that it was emanating from. But that quiet moment helped me figure out where my baseline was. So as I walked into the environment around me, I realized what was mine and what wasn't mine. And that was incredibly nourishing for my nervous system. So whatever it is for you, whether it's 5 minutes and just checking in with your heart and asking, how do you feel today? I have a journal over my bed. I try really hard to sit with it a lot more often. I love to write. I just don't always have the time to do it. But small moments for you, you are worth it. I'm going to say that again. You are worth it. You deserve these moments. And I know that there is a lot of shame and guilt that a lot of women feel over not constantly being in motion because our culture has told us that we need to live in spring and summer energy and produce and move all the time. But in Chinese medicine, this perimenopausal transition is actually the autumn, and you are moving through your middle years. And there's a letting go that happens in the fall. Just think about the leaves being let go of from the trees and falling to the ground. They turn this beautiful color. And then there's a transition that takes place. So if we can grieve the things that no longer serve us, let go of the things that no longer serve us, and really be true to who we are inside and how we feel and what we want, it's incredibly freeing. And it helps us open up that space to be able to notice little things like how the breeze feels on your skin and how the tea feels going down your throat. You know, those pleasure moments that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, beautiful reflection. Absolutely. You're worth it and you're worthy.
Oh, I love that. It's so true. You're worth it and you're worthy. Absolutely. Yeah. So if this really resonates with you and people want to get in touch with you, Carla, how can they get a hold of you?
So I would love to invite your listeners to enjoy. I have a free vibrancy guide. And so a lot of what we were talking about today is in there. It's practical, it's doable, and you will start to feel so much better in your body and your being right away. So just to go to vibrancyreset.com, and that takes you right to my website. And that is where you can find out everything about me and more.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom today. I know I'm going to be sharing this episode a lot because the way that you articulated these things is just so rich and meaningful. And I like that you're an alchemist just like me. So make sure to check out the link in the show notes. We are going to put Carla's amazing offering in there as well. And until next time, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at MoonEssenceMe on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.